Hello, and thank you for watching. My name is Bradford Roberts, Principal Broker, Founder, and Owner of TR Realty in the Las Vegas area. After watching this video, please be sure to like it as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. Download the pertinent handouts for this video by clicking the link in the comments below. Now let's get started. All right, so we are about to get into the short sale paperwork. For those of you who've watched many of my videos, you know that I typically intersperse the forms with the material. As we come to a particular topic, we handle the requisite form. When I teach the short sale class, I like to do the paperwork at the end. And the reason for that is that most agents don't have any experience with short sales. So I want to make sure that everyone who comes to my class or watches my video understands the terminology, the process, the ramifications, the strategies before we get to the paperwork. So that's why our final segment here of Class 6 is the short sale paperwork. And as is always the case, it is smart if you have downloaded my handouts so that you can follow along on the form. That is the best way and maybe the only way that you're going to understand the forms that I'm about to cover. So let us begin with the first one, which is the Addendum to Listing Agreement Short Sale. That is how they entitle the document. We refer to that as an SSALA, Short Sale Addendum to the Listing Agreement. So please pause this video if you need to, but have this form in front of you. All right, looking at this addendum, it says at the top, this addendum is hereby made a part of the listing agreement. So as you heard me say at the beginning of my Class 6 video series, whenever we list a short sale, we absolutely must do the short sale addendum to the listing agreement. It is required. And if you are listing a property that is not at the time a short sale, but later becomes a short sale, either due to the homeowner delinquency on the mortgage or market conditions, you're going to have to add this to the listing agreement later. So seller's name, broker's name, date, and property address at the top. Paragraph 1, acknowledgement of short sale. So this paragraph is to inform the seller exactly what it means to do a situation. And the first 4 lines get into details explaining what a short sale really is. And I want to bring your attention toward the end of the paragraph where the font is bold. It says, broker has no control over lender approval or any act, omission, or decision by any lender in the short sale process. Seller understands that lender's approval may take several weeks or months to obtain, and broker cannot guarantee the timeliness of lender's review, approval, or rejection. And not only is that paragraph so important, but in fact, all of the paragraphs in this addendum are so important that they each require individual initials. So when you turn this form into our compliance department, we are going to ensure that the seller has initialed this paragraph and every paragraph after it. Paragraph number 2 says seller understands there may be disadvantages to a short sale. Seller is advised to explore other options with lender and other appropriate professionals. So yes, the seller doesn't have to do a short sale, right? He could walk away and throw the keys down the sewer grate. He could do a deed in lieu. He could attempt to do a loan modification, or he could just make his payments. So he has options. He is not compelled to do a short sale. Paragraph number 3 talks about the consequences of the short sale. A short sale may have legal, tax, and credit consequences. It may be reported to credit reporting agencies, etc. And then it says, very importantly, I want to bring your attention to line 3, where it says, lender may not agree to forgive the entire debt. Lender may not agree to forgive the entire debt. I hope that makes a lot of sense to you by now. If you've been paying attention in my Class 6 video series, you know we talk about lien release and full satisfaction. So when a real estate agent is not able to get full satisfaction, well, in many cases they don't even try, that is lien release only, which allows the property to convey from the seller to buyer but does not negate the homeowner's responsibility for that deficiency. So that's a bad situation. We don't want that, but that is referred to here where it says lender may not agree to forgive the entire debt. And a couple of lines below that, it says lender may issue a 1099 form to seller. So we've also covered that situation. Sometimes if the lender does not forgive the debt, they will issue a 1099. So they've chosen to write off the debt, in which case they can no longer pursue the collection of that debt. And I did tell you in an earlier video that the presentation of a 1099 to the seller by the lender means that the lender has chosen to forego any future collection activity of that deficiency. Paragraph 4, seller agrees to cooperate with broker, escrow and title companies, and lender to determine the amount of debt. Paragraph 5, seller understands that failure to make loan payments may result in foreclosure of the property, and seller represents that a notice of default an election to sell has not or has been recorded. Now, either way, folks, we're going to take the listing. There's no problem with that. You probably remember from earlier in this video series where I said that a notice of default begins a statutory waiting period. And it's a strange number, but in the state of Nevada, it happens to be 3 months and 20 days, during which the lender cannot foreclose on the property. So even if there is a notice of default, again, we still take that listing knowing that we have time. And, in reality, even though the lender has to wait 3 months and 20 days, they typically wait a lot longer. Maybe it's due to a backlog or being short-staffed or whatever the circumstances are internally with the lender. But I don't want you to think that if you're 3 months and 10 days into a notice of default, that automatically 10 days from now, they're going to get a foreclosure notice or a notice of auction. It's probably not going to happen. And then at the end of paragraph 5, there's a very important sentence that says, seller understands that broker cannot stop a foreclosure. So that is nice and tidy for our protection, but the practical reality is that that's the reason that they hired us, to stop that foreclosure, to get them through a short sale and stave off that foreclosure completely. Paragraph 6, seller shall reasonably cooperate with broker and lender in the short sale process. And what they're talking about here is the provision of documents, things like financial documents, third-party authorization letter, bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, that sort of thing. And really, really importantly, at the end of this paragraph 6, it says in bold print, broker shall not verify any information provided by seller, and seller agrees to defend, indemnify, and hold broker harmless for same. Yeah, that has to be there because there's no way that we can stand behind the veracity of the information that they provide, right? If they give us bank statements on 2 of their accounts, how would we possibly know they have a third account? If they have misrepresented things in their hardship letter or provided inaccurate, incomplete, financial information, bank statements, tax returns, we can't be held liable for that. So that's why that language is in there. Paragraph 7, the disclosure of short sale. Seller acknowledges that broker is required by the rules and policies of MLS to identify the property listing as a short sale. Yep, can't be any secret short sales. We always have to disclose it in MLS. That's why we need the SSA LA attached to our listing agreement. That's why we need the SSA PA attached to our purchase and sale agreement. All parties involved in a short sale transaction must be completely aware that they're engaging in a short sale, which obviously changes a lot of the rules of the game, right? So we can't do that behind closed doors. Everyone has to be aware. And then we come to paragraph 8 in the SSALA, which is by far the most dangerous paragraph because it gives you the opportunity to write language. Never, never write language. It is the number one thing that gets agents in trouble. We have a company prohibition on it. Agents should never write language. The only exception would be if you have a Nevada bar certificate. You are a licensed practicing attorney in the state of Nevada. If you are not, never write language. Did I mention that? And toward the bottom of the second page, this is a place where the seller needs to sign. That's first. Second, the designated licensee, that's you, needs to sign. And then this form is going to be submitted to our compliance department for my electronic signature as well. And as we said earlier, this form actually becomes an addendum to the listing agreement. All right, so that is the SSA-LA. Let us move on to the SSA-PA, the short sale addendum to the purchase agreement. And it actually contains a lot of the same disclosure type language. Paragraph 1 says this is contingent on existing lender approval. Sure, that's what the short sale contingency means. That even though the contract is between the buyer and the seller, if we don't get the lender or lenders on board to cooperate and approve our short sale, there's going to be no deal. So contingent upon existing lender approval. It goes on to talk about what a short sale is, just like the SSA-LA. And then very importantly, at the end of line 12, end of line 11, moving to line 12 in the bold print, seller understands and acknowledges that lender approval may be conditioned upon any or all of the following. A, making a cash payment. Well, that's what we talked about buying short sale approval. There are times that the seller has to make a payment to the lender to facilitate that short sale approval. B, signing a new promissory note. Yes, that is an alternative to an upfront cash payment. Sometimes the lender will ask for the seller to sign a promissory note. So basically, instead of the cash payment, they're going to take some installment payments for the short sale process. C, continuing to owe the lender the unpaid portion of the loan. Yeah, there again is the case of the deficiency and the real estate agent not able to obtain that full satisfaction. And D, other requirements made by lenders. So all of those scenarios could happen. And if you look down to line 18, it says approval may take several months. And this paragraph is so important that it does require the buyer and seller both to initial on line 21. Again, transparency, disclosure, the parties need to know they're engaging in a short sale transaction, which is different than a regular transaction. Let's move on to paragraph 2, which says notice of lender approval. And very, very importantly, toward the end of line 2 and line 3 of this paragraph, it says seller may use the lender short sale approval addendum. Didn't we just talk about that at the end of the last segment? Didn't I say the seller has the right to take that lender short sale approval addendum and attach it to the approval letter? And I believe I said to you in that segment that the seller does have the right to do it because it is in the SSAPA. I did say that, right? So here it is. It is in the SSAPA, paragraph 2, and this is going to protect the seller. We're going to talk about that. Paragraph number 3, no guarantee of lender approval. Buyer and seller understand that no lender is required or obligated to accept a short sale, and that lender approval may be revoked at any time prior to close of escrow. In addition, the parties understand that lender may require that in exchange for approval, some terms of the purchase agreement be amended. Yep. That's the counteroffer we talked about. That's possible change in commission that we talked about, change in price, change in closing date, and possibly other things. So here it is all coming together, all the things we've been talking about in Class 6 now being reduced into this SSAPA. And very importantly, I want to bring your attention to document line 32, where it says neither buyer nor seller is obligated to agree to any of lender's proposed terms. Either party may, in its sole discretion, reject the amended terms required by lender. In such event, the purchase agreement shall be void. And moving ahead to line 35 here, it says, neither the buyer, the seller, the escrow holder, nor the brokers in this transaction have any control over lender approval or any act, omission, or decision by any lender in the short sale process. How I wish we did. All right, moving on to paragraph 4, which is an unbelievably important paragraph. And before we get into the paragraph, I want to mention that I constantly see, and I literally saw it yesterday. Literally yesterday, one of our associates here at TR Realty has a short sale listing. An agent with another company I won't mention submitted an offer and failed to include the short sale addendum to the purchase agreement with the offer, which of course is a critical mistake that he made. But what he tried to do was to write some language into additional terms on the RPA, on the contract, to try to deal with some of the things that in his limited wisdom he realized needed to be handled. Had he had the training that you are having right now, he would have realized that there's already a form, the SSAPA, that addresses these things, and not just addresses them, but addresses them clearly, concisely, and in a legally binding manner, not just some words that came out of his, we'll say his anatomy, right? So that brings us back to paragraph 4, which, as I told you, is incredibly important. It says, opening escrow and depositing earnest money shall occur as stated in the purchase agreement. Did you get that? Opening escrow and depositing earnest money shall occur as stated in the purchase agreement. So regardless of the fact that this is a short sale, once we effectuate the contract between the buyer and the seller, escrow is opened, earnest money is deposited. However, that's all we want to do unless and until we get short sale approval. And that's why checking the box on line 44 is the right, prudent, smart thing to do, and in my opinion, the only way you want to handle this paragraph. If you were to choose the line 43 box as stated in the purchase agreement, let me tell you what would happen. We would open escrow, we would deposit EMD, and the buyer's due diligence period would start right now. They'd have to do their inspection, they'd have to do their appraisal, they'd have to apply for the mortgage. The seller would have to provide the resale package. So people are incurring expense, and it's way too soon. We don't know when, we don't even know if we will ever get short sale approval. So basically what we want to do here, let me say this differently. What we want to do in a short sale situation is effectuate the contract between the buyer and seller, open escrow, deposit EMD, and stop right there. We want everything else to go on pause unless and until we get that short sale approval. And the way to protect your clients is to use this addendum, use line 44 and 44 only in this paragraph. Paragraph 5, close of escrow. Buyer and seller understand that lender approval will include an expiration date by which COE must occur. And we've talked about that as well, how important it is when you get that short sale approval letter that you make sure you have adequate time to close your transaction. Paragraph 6, buyer and seller acknowledge that the seller's agent is required by MLS to place the property in contingent status. Well, LVR hasn't updated this form in 7 years. And at the time this form was drafted, we did have something called contingent status. That status no longer exists in our MLS system. We now have to put the property in UCS status, under contract show, which is tantamount to the old contingent status. And some agents think, well, since this is a short sale and we don't have lender approval, we can just leave the property active on the market and wait for lender approval. No, you cannot. That is a violation. Remember, again, the short sale contract is a contract between the buyer and the seller. Once it's under contract, you need to indicate so honestly and transparently in MLS. You cannot keep the property active. It must go into UCS status. It also talks about in this paragraph the fact that there may be other offers. Notice it says the parties understand that additional offers may be received by the seller's agent, which must be presented to the seller, not to the lender, to the seller. And then it says seller may choose to accept such subsequent offers as backup offers. Yes, they can. Yes, they should. And we have talked about that as well. Paragraph 7, perhaps the second most important paragraph, is the waiting period. A number of days during which the buyer is agreeing not to cancel. In other words, the buyer is going to give you a certain number of days that he knows he's got to be cool. He's got to, stand back and wait for you to work your short sale magic. He's agreeing not to cancel. Obviously, the shorter the number of days, the less committed the buyer is to the process. And the opposite side of that coin is the more time the buyer is willing to give the seller to get his short sale approved, the more committed he is to the process. So frankly, if I were the listing agent in a short sale, I wouldn't accept anything less than 90 days here. Short sales take time. If buyers don't understand that, they shouldn't be writing an offer on a short sale. Notice here that the box to check is to the left of the number of days. And the reason I say that, I know it sounds very elementary, is just because I see agents get this wrong all the time. So if the buyer is willing to wait 45 days as an example, they check the box to the left of where it says 45. And then there's also choices for 60, 90, or something else. Sometimes you see a buyer who's really committed, really wants the property, and they'll choose something else, 120, 180. I've even seen buyers write in 365. They're willing to wait a year for the short sale process. That's a very serious committed buyer. Now, if the buyer, in fewer days than they've agreed to wait, tries to cancel the transaction, their EMD is subject to forfeiture. So again, this is the waiting period. This is the number of days that they're agreeing to wait. In practical reality, let's say the buyer chooses a 90-day waiting period, and 30 days in, the buyer decides that they found another house, or they're moving to Alaska, or whatever. They don't want to wait anymore. So technically, we could hold them to this contract. We could say, look, you've agreed to wait 90 days here, and we're not going to let you cancel after 30 days. But you know what's going to happen if we do that? They're probably going to chill, and they're going to wait the 90 days. If and when you get the short sale approval, their due diligence period begins, they're going to cancel at that time. And now you've done a ton of work, you've lost a ton of time, your seller is incurring additional expenses on the property, taxes, insurance, interest on the mortgage, utilities, etc. Landscaping, could be all kinds of things. So in all practical reality, despite the waiting period in paragraph 7, if the buyer really wants to get out of the contract, it's probably a smart idea to let them out, knowing they're only going to cancel and derail you. You'll just be kicking that can down the road. Paragraph 8, foreclosure and other property issues. I want to bring your attention to line 22, where it says seller agrees to provide buyer with the supplemental property disclosure within 5 days. So that is another form that we've not talked about in Class 6, but I actually covered it in Class 4. And it is a good idea because often in cases of short sales, the seller is in financial distress, maybe not paying other things as well. So the form that we're talking about here, the supplemental property disclosure form, I think is a prudent idea. Well, I like it on all listings, but it's especially of importance in a short sale listing as well. Paragraph 9, short sale may have serious and adverse consequences. The seller has every right to talk to an attorney or an accountant or whoever he wishes. Paragraph 10 is very important. It's about the unfulfilled contingency. Obviously, the short sale contingency is what we're talking about. It says, if the lender rejects the short sale, the seller will promptly notify the buyer of the rejection, and the purchase agreement shall be void due to the unfulfilled contingency, and escrow shall be canceled. In such event, escrow holder is instructed to return EMD to the buyer without any further instruction from the parties. So that's our short sale contingency. That's why we have it in there. And obviously, if the seller is not able to get that short sale approved, the deal's dead and the buyer is entitled to a refund of his EMD. Paragraph 11, stay away, folks. Do not write any language. And the third page of this SSAPA requires signatures from both the buyers and the sellers, as well as the dates and times and the name of the agent who presented this form. Also, don't forget the initials all the way down the bottom of the pages. John, let me have a quick minute. All right, let us move on to the third one, third handout here, which is the TR Realty short sale seller disclosure. So whenever we have the name TR Realty in the name of the document, that should tell you that it's our own creation, and this is available on our website and available in Broker Mint as well. So the purpose of this form, the reason this thing was created, was redundancy. And even though everything pretty much that's in here also appears in the listing agreement and or the short sale addendum to the listing agreement, people don't read things, right? They don't read through things that are long and complicated and tedious. So what we did here was we took some of the key points, and just between you and me here, some of the key points that can really affect you as the agent, and we repeated them. We reworded them, and we put them into the TR Realty short sale seller disclosure just for purposes of clarification, just to make sure they understand exactly what's going on. Let's go through these real quick. It says, Nevada law requires sellers of real property located within a common interest community to provide a resale to prospective buyers at seller's own expense. Yep, not negotiable anymore. It used to be. Also, not at the lender's expense. So even in a short sale situation, if the property is in a CIC, Nevada law says the seller has to provide the resale package at his own expense. So we don't want to spend months working on a short sale, only to the point that we get short sale approval, we open the due diligence period, and now it's time for the seller to provide the resale package, and he refuses. He says, nobody ever told me, I don't want to spend this money. It is the law, but what are you going to do about it? So that's why we put it here front and center, item number 1 on this disclosure. Number 2, TR Realty charges a processing fee in the amount of $299, which is payable upon signing the listing agreement. Did you get that? Payable upon signing the listing agreement. Now, typically, our processing fee is collected at closing and as a condition of closing and not until closing. However, the reason that we collect the processing fee up front in a short sale is to ensure the seller is actually committed to the process. $299 is not going to change anybody's life, right? But the point is, if they even balk at the $299, and they're probably not making mortgage payments, it should tell you where your seller's at mentally. How much time and effort do you really want to put in the file? Because when you start needing things, which you're going to need a lot of things from him, from the hardship letter to the bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs, on and on and on, okay? If he's not willing to even pay the processing fee up front, it's probably an indication of what is to come with this seller. So I highly recommend that you follow this and you collect that processing fee up front. Now, in a lot of cases, we can actually get the lender to agree to the processing fee. So he's going to get reimbursed in most cases. All right, but if he does something to derail that short sale, he's going to lose his $299. The third one, broker shall install a lockbox. Yep, not an option. We are racing against time here. We may be facing foreclosure. Short sales are difficult anyway. And if we complicate this by difficult showing instructions, you have to set an appointment to go in the house. Unless the market were super, super heated, then that's just not realistic. So we're going to put a lockbox on a short sale. And the next one says the same thing about a sign. Not an option, not something to think about. We're going to go ahead and we're going to install a sign on the property. The fifth one, the seller has to provide contact information. The sixth one says the seller is going to continue to pay assessments, if applicable, as well as property taxes and homeowners insurance. Yes, some sellers think, well, I don't have to pay my taxes anymore, right? If you don't pay the taxes anymore, you're going to get another lien on the property, and this one's going to be from the county, and it's not going to be easy for the agent to get this lien released. And if you don't pay homeowners insurance, if something happens to the property, guess who's responsible? The seller. He still owns the property. So in some cases, these things are impounded as part of their mortgage payment, but if they are paid separately, he needs to keep them paid. And that goes for the next one as well. All utilities, including water, sewer, and trash, must remain on at the seller's own expense throughout the duration of the short sale process and until close of escrow. If you allow the seller to disconnect the utilities, the house starts to deteriorate, the landscaping starts to die, mold starts to grow, bad things happen to the property. Utilities have to be kept on all the way through close of escrow. The next one says cooperate with requests for showings. Yeah, you can't be a couple of months away from a foreclosure and say, well, we're not going to show the property this weekend. My kid has a bouncy house in the backyard, right? That's insanity. These people are going to be living under a bouncy house if they don't cooperate with the process. So they have to cooperate with the showings. The next one says the property shall be maintained in a clean and orderly fashion. Yes, you cannot trash the house. It says the property must be vacant unless tenant occupied, including the removal of all possessions and debris prior to the buyer's walkthrough. Think about that for a second. Typically, the property must be vacated prior to close of escrow. But I know from experience that the same guy who hires you to do a short sale is the same guy who's going to try to stay in the house after you get short sale approval and you're ready to close escrow. Why? Well, he might be financially distressed. He might not have anywhere to go. So you went through months and months of work and you've got a buyer ready to move in and a mortgage is approved and the appraisal's done, etc. And now you got a guy who's not cooperating and not moving out, okay? So that's why we have this language. In a short sale situation, I recommend that the seller is out of the house before the walkthrough inspection. And then it says a short sale is the method that seller has elected to dispose of the property and agrees neither to seek nor to accept an alternative method of disposition. So we don't want him to turn around and work with the bank on doing a deed in lieu or something like that while we're trying to work a short sale. The next one says all real property, which is defined as anything that is attached to the property, regardless of who purchased it or when it was purchased, shall remain with the property and convey to the buyer. That goes back to the comment I made that the seller cannot strip the property. The next one says, upon request by broker, seller shall provide a hardship letter and financial worksheet. You already know about that stuff. And any breach of the above terms and conditions shall automatically grant broker the authority to withdraw the property from the market, either temporarily or permanently at broker's sole discretion. Yeah, we've seen cases where the seller hired an agent, or a broker, I should say, to put a property on the market for a short sale, and then during the process, the guy just disappeared. Just completely gone. I've seen people leave the country in the middle of a short sale process. Now what are we supposed to do? We can't just go into MLS and change the status to withdrawn or whatever we want without the seller's signature. So if the seller has fled the country, turned off his cell phone, not answering his email or whatever, how can we comply with MLS policy? We have to have written authorization from the seller. What if we can't get it? This is how we get it, and this is how we get it up front. Seller has to sign, print, date. Don't forget the initials at the bottom of the page. And now I want to talk about the lender short sale approval addendum that I've mentioned a couple of times. This is a fairly short and simple form. It's a way to protect the seller. So remember that I mentioned to you that about a third of the time I've seen a short sale approval letter, it's wrong. They often forget, I'll put that in quotes, they forget the full satisfaction language. The numbers are wrong. Could be anything. Could be subject to a promissory note or a cash payment, things you didn't even agree to. When they send that short sale approval letter, you know what it says at the top? Short sale approval letter. And isn't your contract with the buyer contingent upon approval? So the letter that the lender calls an approval letter could be deemed by the buyer also to be approval. What if the seller doesn't agree to the terms? What if it's not full satisfaction? What if it requires a cash contribution or promissory note? And the seller says, no, I'm not going to go ahead with the short sale under these amended terms and conditions. And now the buyer says, hey, this is contingent upon short sale approval. You got an approval letter, and I'm going to sue you for specific performance failure to close on this contract. So let's completely stave off that kind of argument and the potential for legal action, and let's use this lender short sale approval addendum. And we would need one of these forms for each lender involved in the short sale process. Notice it says about a quarter of the way down in bold print, this addendum is only effective if the lender approval is attached. Remember I told you we take the approval letter and we attach it to the lender short sale approval addendum. And it says in paragraph 1, seller's response. Seller has reviewed and understands the attached lender approval and responds as follows. So this is the choice that gives him the protection I've been referring to. First choice, seller removes the contingency in the agreement as to the above named lender only. All right, so that's why I said we need one for each lender. Or seller declines the terms of the lender approval and hereby cancels the agreement. So just in case we are not able to get the terms and conditions that satisfy the seller in the short sale process, this is a way out, and I highly, highly recommend you attach this to each and every short sale approval letter that the lender sends. And then paragraph 2, which is only fair, is the buyer's response to that. So whatever the seller has to say in paragraph 1, the buyer gets an equal chance to respond that he's okay to proceed, or conversely, he's going to reject the terms. Could be a changed price, an amended closing date, could be anything. But the buyer also has the opportunity to say, I don't like what the lender came back with, and I'm going to refuse that as well. So simple document, lots of protection for the seller, some protection for the buyer as well, and I highly, highly recommend that. And folks, one more thing I want to mention. It is not one of our handouts today because we've already covered this in class 4. However, I do want to mention the supplemental property disclosure form, which we did talk about a few minutes ago. It is recommended. I mentioned to you that the seller might be in financial distress. We'd like to know if he's behind on his HOA. We'd like to know if he's filed bankruptcy and some other financially relevant things. So that's why I think that we should always do the supplemental property disclosure form as part of our listing in any case, and certainly as part of our listing in a short sale situation. I would like to thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative for you. If you are licensed with another brokerage in Southern Nevada and would like to talk with me, please text me or visit our website. See you next time.